Hey guys, it's Melissa here from melissaoatman.com. Welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness, the weekly podcast devoted to all things spirituality and self-improvement. I am so delighted you're here with me today. So I had an interesting thing happen. I had a podcast interview scheduled with someone who was going to be a really interesting guest. And the weirdest thing happened. My scheduler didn't work right. So the person signed up for a one-time slot and it shows it on that app. Then you go to Zoom and it's a completely different time. And so there was a mix-up. And so then that person couldn't do the interview and then something else came up. And it's just been a crazy day. But I asked the universe, okay, what is this all about? What do you want me to do in this case since we now don't have a guest? And what I heard was there was a reason. I want to introduce to you one of my chapters from my book, Beautiful Mourning. And I feel like this is really important because I know there's so many people who are going through grief. And grief is such a heavy process. And so my gift to you today is just to give you a free chapter of my audiobook in hopes that if there's anyone out there who's experiencing grief, and grief comes in many forms. It comes from losing a job, losing your vitality and health, losing a loved one, or just losing some aspect of yourself. We all experience grief at one point in time or another. Throughout our lives, we experience it multiple times. And so my hope is that in writing this book, I could help those of you who are out there struggling. So I want to introduce to you today chapter 1 of my book, Beautiful Mourning, which is now available on audiobook. It's also available on ebook and also available in print. And I do have the links to the book in my show notes. If you enjoy it and you feel so compelled, if you feel like it's helping you and you would like to read it, then I have those links in there for you to go and you can click on them and purchase the book. I didn't want to leave you with just anything today though. So on the topic of grief, I did want to pull a few cards for you today before you get to the book reading to give you maybe some guidance and some wisdom for the upcoming week. So I pulled one tarot card today just to see what message does the universe have for the collective. And what came out is the Four of Cups. And today this card suggests that you need to engage in self-reflection. In the context of the card of the day, you may also see laziness, fatigue, and a lack of desire to engage in anything at all. Dedicate your day to solitude, maybe doing some meditation. Some of you are feeling restless in life, and you feel like you're stuck or stagnant, or you're just not happy with the way things are going. The Four of Cups is really all about this cup being held in front of you, and you just don't even see it because you're so distracted by boredom and despair and thinking about all the ways life is going wrong around you. And what the universe wants you to know is that there is this cup in front of you. They're handing you opportunities, but you're not seeing them because you're too busy pining about how terrible things are in life. And the universe doesn't want you to feel that way. The universe wants you to see the blessings that are all around you. So it's time to take some alone time, some solitude time to contemplate and really see what are the blessings that are all around me, because they are there. They are evident if we look for them. Another card that came out is it's time to take action. What step can you take today to feel closer to your goal or dream? Today, cross one item off your to-do list. Build momentum by taking baby steps, crossing one thing off at a time. The action with this card is, I will commit to doing blank today. What's one thing you'll commit to doing? And the mantra is, when I show up consistently, I build confidence within myself. And your next card is, I deserve. You deserve to enjoy an amazing life that brings you joy and abundance. You were born worthy. There is nothing you need to do to prove your worth. Journal what your best day would look and feel like. See it in your mind. We need to feel it before we can receive it. And the mantra that goes with this card is, I am worthy of a life I love. So one thing I want you to do is to commit to doing one thing for self-care today. Most of us are on this healing journey and we are on this process, and it can be tiring. We can feel fatigue from trying to heal. But what I want you to do today is one thing. I want you to do something nice for yourself. And the second thing I want you to do is to listen to chapter 1 of my book and really allow yourself to connect to it. There's a message in there for you. Even if you feel like, oh, I've never experienced grief or I haven't lost anyone, there's still a message for you. I want you to listen to this, and I want you to do something kind for yourself. Notice the blessings around you and rest. You're feeling fatigued. You need the rest. Don't overwhelm yourself. All right, guys, I hope you have an amazing and beautiful day. Remember that all of the links for my book are in my show notes, and also the link for my website. If you feel like you want to work with me, I offer one-on-one coaching sessions. I also offer readings where I pull cards for you and get intuitive messages from your guides. All of that can be found at melissaoatman.com. I have half-hour and hour sessions you can book directly from my website. Take care of yourself. Have a beautiful day. I hope you enjoy Beautiful Mourning.
Chapter 1. Pain Like No Other, When Grief First Strikes. Grief is an interesting thing. Everyone experiences it at some point in their life, yet no two people have the same grief journey. When grief first strikes you, it's shocking, painful, and confusing. Grief is a very complex thing. It's intense. If you've ever been impacted by grief, spoiler alert, everyone has, it can be downright overwhelming. It feels like you're on the receiving end of a surprise attack by a huge infantry, only the infantry here is the army of your emotions. They seem to come from every direction and hit you all at the same time. You are confused, lost, hurt, angry, hungry. Wait, did she just say hungry? Yes, I did. I'm always hungry. Don't judge me. Anyway, you never really know what emotion will hit you next. It's like a treacherous battlefield where you're attacked from all sides and you're left wondering what the hell just happened. Experts often refer to grief as a journey. What an interesting word choice. Why is grief referred to as a journey? When I think about the word journey, a fantastic, fun, and exciting adventure comes to mind. I think of trips to Europe or beautiful scenic hiking trails. We used to drive 8 hours to see my relatives in Michigan. Those trips were always filled with laughter, singing in the car, and 20 stops for food along the way. It was exciting, and yes, food-filled. I'm hungry again, but I digress. Journeys are supposed to be magical and fun. A journey is not what I picture at all when I hear the word grief. Grief is not exciting. It's not a great adventure, and there's absolutely nothing fun about it either. Grief is excruciating and cruel. That's why I like to think of it as an attack. It is relentless, and just when you think you start to feel better, it strikes you again, seemingly out of nowhere. Grief just plain sucks, and it changes your whole life. Every person that I have ever talked to about grief said that it changed them in a major way. I lost my mom to cancer in 2022, and it changed me profoundly. This is my story of grief and how it shook me to my very core. If you were to look up the word journey in the dictionary, you would see that the word is defined as an act of traveling from one place to another. Maybe that's why they call grief a journey. Although you don't physically travel from one place to another, your emotions take you from one place to another every single day. It's like standing on the shores of a beach. One moment, the waves of emotion are small and manageable. Everything is calm, and you think to yourself, maybe I can get through the rest of my life without my loved one around. Maybe I will be okay. On other days, the waves are so enormous and torrential that you wonder how you can remain standing. The waves are so forceful that when they hit you, they knock the breath out of you. The current takes you under, and you can't even seem to keep your head above water. That's what grief is. At least it is in my own experience. Grief drags you and carries you from one emotion to the next and from one day to the next. One moment, you don't know how you can live even one more second when you're missing your loved one so badly. In other moments, your emotions are calmer and more manageable. Then there are days when your emotions are everywhere in between. You never really know what will set those gigantic waves of grief in motion. And you never know how you'll feel each day when you wake up or even from moment to moment. All it takes to change your day is one thought, one memory, or one person asking about your loved one. These experiences can trigger an entire tsunami of emotion in just a matter of seconds. Grief is such a heavy subject that I try to infuse a little comic relief in my writing. Plus, humor has a powerful healing effect. At least it does for me. If you read my previous book, What Do You Mean You Haven't Read It Yet? You will know that I'm a very sarcastic person, and my sarcasm brings people so much joy. I bring people a lot of joy just merely by being me. Did I mention that I'm also an extremely humble person? Back to the point. It's good to laugh. Laughter is a natural healer. Speaking of laughter, comparing grief to waves in the ocean reminds me of a humorous memory. I love retelling this story because I can still hear my mom's laughter in it. Her laughter was one of the best sounds ever. It was contagious. One summer, a group of my mom's friends and I went to the beach in Gulf Shores. If you've ever been there, you know how rough the waves can be. One of our friends was fighting the waves, trying to walk back to the shore from the ocean. The waves were knocking her all around. She was trying to hold her hat, walk, and avoid being knocked down all at the same time. The view from where we were swimming was quite amusing. We would say, "Oh, she's up. Oh, wait, she's down." That continued over and over again for several minutes. She ended up crawling back to the shore. Let's just say that she was not thrilled with us, but we couldn't stop laughing. And the more we tried to stop laughing, the harder we laughed, and the more angry our friend became. This, of course, became a vicious cycle. My mom was laughing the hardest. It looked like a scene taken straight out of the I Love Lucy show. I mention this story not only to make you laugh, but also because it reminds me of the grief journey. When we are living with grief, we're merely trying to move on in our lives. We're just trying to reach the shore from the depths of grief, but we keep getting knocked back down again and again by the tumultuous waves. We're tired, drained, and left crumpled in a ball on the shore. Let me tell you that just as my friend was not thrilled with us for laughing at her, I'm not too thrilled with grief either. Grief makes getting through a regular day all the more difficult. It feels so heavy, unfair, and vindictive. I have experienced grief many times throughout my life. The strongest and most intense experience of grief for me was when I lost my mom to pancreatic cancer in January of 2022. I was very close to my mom. She was one of my best friends. Not only did we lose her, but we also had to watch her suffer, waste away, and become a shadow of her former self from this horrible disease. It was shocking because she was so full of life before her diagnosis. She was a retired teacher, but she continued to sub. I used to joke with her that she made retirement look difficult. That was her. Her love for teaching and her students was so intense that she continued to work. Even though she retired, she still wanted to keep teaching. It was her heart and soul. When I'm retired, that's all, folks. I will not be doing much except maybe traveling. But not her. She adored teaching. It was who she was. Her death is the loss that deeply changed my life, and it's the reason that I'm sitting here today writing this book. I have been a completely different person since she passed, and I have been through every emotion there is about 1,000,000 times. Her loss made me question everything I thought I knew about life, and my life will never be the same again. My mom was not my first instance of loss, but hers was the most painful of my life. And believe me, I know firsthand what it is to experience pain. I'm a child of the 80s after all. I wore jellies. For the younger crowd, those were plastic shoes. They look super cute, but those things were excruciating. They rub blisters on your toes and on the backs of your heels. People say fashion comes with a price. I guess that price is pain. Speaking of pain, my first experience with loss was when I was 7 years old. My great uncle passed away 2 days before my 8th birthday. It was a very deep loss for me. He was more than just a great uncle. We lived next door to him and saw him almost every single day. We often spent the night at his house because my great aunt took care of us for my mom while she worked. He didn't have any grandkids, and both of my grandpas died before I was born. He was, for all intents and purposes, our grandpa. We even called him Papa. He was the kindest and most joyful person, and his laugh was infectious. He adored us, and we knew it. We had him wrapped around our little fingers. He would do anything for us. There was even a time when he cracked a raw Easter egg on his head. We wanted to trick him, so we told him that it was a hard-boiled egg. He knew it wasn't, but he went along with our little prank and cracked it on his head anyway. We giggled, and he smiled and laughed at our delight as the raw egg dripped down his forehead. I didn't learn until many years later that he knew the egg was raw. That's how much he loved making us laugh. I remember the day he died just like it was yesterday. It will be forever etched in my mind. I had just seen him the day or two before. My 8th birthday was in a few days. He teased me and asked me if I wanted a watch for my birthday. He knew that all I wanted was a Cabbage Patch Kid. I was sitting in my 2nd grade classroom a few days later when they called over the intercom to say that I had an early dismissal. I was so happy. I high-fived my friend and raced down to the office. I never got an early dismissal. When I got there, my mom and her friend were waiting. They had very serious expressions on their faces. My mom waited until we got home to tell us the news. "Papa died this afternoon," she said solemnly. I didn't believe her at first, and I told her to stop lying. She urged me to go next door and see for myself. My sister and I walked next door, and the house was full of people. My great-aunt was sitting with her head in her hands, crying. It scared me so much. I remember walking over to her, sitting on her lap, and hugging her. I heard someone say, "Oh, isn't that sweet? She's trying to comfort her." The truth is that I was trying to comfort myself. I was so sad and scared. I was confused and hurt. Everything felt different then. The days that followed were busy and crazy. The family came in from out of town. There was a wake and a funeral, and we had a small gathering to celebrate our birthday in between all of that craziness. There was both laughter and sadness. Thinking back on those memories brings up so much emotion. I received a diary for my birthday that year. The very first entry in that diary was about my papa dying. It still sends a twinge of pain to my heart to think about that time in my life. There are times when I try to remember what my papa's voice sounded like, and I can't. That loss was devastating for me at the time for many reasons. I had never really experienced the death of someone so close before. I didn't understand what was happening, and because I was only 7, I was too young to grasp what death was. It's scary. I couldn't really process what was happening. I didn't know where he went. Everyone just kept saying that he went to heaven. I didn't know what going to heaven meant. I just knew he wasn't coming back. After he passed, they sold his things at auction. That ripped my heart out, and since we lived next door, we had to watch them sell all of his things to the highest bidder. It was as if he never existed. His things were just gone. At least before the auction, if I wanted to be reminded of him, I could just look at his motorcycle in the garage. Now that was gone too. I was very angry about this as a 7-year-old little girl who didn't understand why it needed to be done. Even as I'm writing this now, it brings me to the present. We also had to sell my mom's belongings. I will never forget the day that we were going through her house. My daughter broke down and started sobbing. It was completely overwhelming for her. She was expressing what we were all feeling. It was as overwhelming to me at 45 as it was to me when I was 7. My papa's death was the first death that really shook me to my core, and it made me start to question what happens to us when we die. Will I ever see my papa again? Will I ever feel better again? I was so scared of losing anyone else in my family that I remember praying about it the night after I found out he died. I spent the night at my Grandma Lassen's house. She was my mom's mom, and we were very close to her. As I watched her walking around in the kitchen, I worried that God might take her too. I remember praying and asking God not to take my Aunt G, who was my papa's wife, my Grandma Lassen, or my mom and dad until I was very old, at least 40. Well, 40 seemed old to a 7-year-old. I now understand that it's not old. I said it's not old. I'm still quite young. In my mind, anyway. in what I now think is a very strange coincidence. I would later go on to lose my Aunt G in 2019, my grandma in 2020, and my mom in 2022. I wish I could go back and change my prayer now. I was just kidding, God. Please bring them back. 40 years wasn't long enough. I should have said 60. Why did you listen to a stupid kid? And no, I don't truly believe that God decided to take them all when I was in my 40s because I prayed for it. I mean, why would God do what a 7-year-old told him to do? I didn't know anything at that age. All I cared about was whether I was getting a Cabbage Patch doll for my birthday. By the way, I did get one, and I loved her so much. I mean, why would God listen to a 7-year-old anyway? I was happy if my favorite episode of Punky Brewster was on TV. My priorities were not that great. My next experience with loss was equally confusing and upsetting. My cousin Jimmy died in a car accident when I was just 14. He was in his 20s, and I always looked up to my older cousins. His mom and my mom were sisters. When I was younger, his mom would babysit for us. We would watch wrestling with him and his siblings. I remember one Christmas Eve, all of my older male cousins teased us relentlessly about liking the New Kids on the Block. They changed the lyrics of Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer to New Kids on the Block Got Run Over by a Reindeer. We were livid. They thought it was hilarious. They were always teasing us and joking around. We had really happy memories of Jimmy from our childhood. I felt blessed to have had cousins that loved us so much. I hadn't known a young person who died before. I always thought it was one of those things that was tragic when it happened, but it didn't really happen to you or your family. It's just something you read about in the newspaper or saw on TV. This death was especially traumatic for me because it was the first time I thought about my own mortality. I know that seems silly. Of course I knew that I would die someday. I just assumed it wouldn't be until I was very old because that's the way things worked. Remember, God, 45 is not old. Now I knew someone who died young. It could happen to me, or worse, it could happen to another family member. What if it happened to one of my siblings? This became very real for me. I will never forget hearing the screams from my aunt when she first went in to view her son. It's a sound you don't soon forget. It was a helpless feeling because I wanted to be able to take away her pain, yet there was nothing that I or anyone else could say or do that would ease the heartbreak. I will always believe that it's the cruelest thing on earth to lose a child. I know there's a higher purpose in it, but I have yet to figure out what it is. I think that might be my first question to God when I get to the other side. That, and why did you listen to a stupid 7-year-old? The next major experience that I had with death is one that I wish I could completely erase from my memory. It was traumatic and horrific and still causes me nightmares even to this day. My ex-husband and father of my children took his own life in 2020. I was teaching a class when I received a text from his brother asking me to call him as soon as possible. I immediately had a sinking feeling because I never got texts from his brother. We had been divorced for almost 18 years at that point. I knew something was wrong. When I called him, his voice sounded broken. He said, "My brother took his life last night." My kids were seniors in high school, and when I received the news, my daughter was sitting in my classroom just feet away from me as I heard the words, "took his own life." I had her as a student in my German class that year, and I had to spend 30 excruciating minutes acting as though nothing was wrong. I had to lie and say that it was my doctor on the phone confirming a prescription. I couldn't tell her the truth. I felt panic-stricken. I was sick to my stomach. My head was spinning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, and most of all, I wanted out of there. Time crawled for me at that moment. Unfortunately for me that day, both of my kids regularly came in and ate lunch in my room during third hour. Not only did I have to act normal in front of my daughter, but my son came in for lunch, and I still had to act as though I hadn't just heard the most gruesome news of my life. I had to endure 30 more minutes of agony. Yet again, time was my enemy. I wanted to throw up. Yet I had to smile at them, knowing that in just a few hours, I would shatter their hearts and change their lives forever. I watched as they laughed and giggled at each other. My heart was sinking further into my stomach. I was fighting back tears. How would I ever be able to tell them what happened? I hated this so much. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair that I had to be the one to tell them. I did not want to have to tell them. What would I even say? How could I break their hearts like that? This was my first year teaching at the school, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anyone that I trusted enough to go to with this news. I did the first thing my instincts said to do, which was to reach out to Mom. I texted her immediately. She tried to comfort me via text. I could tell that she was shocked and shaken up too. She told me to go home as soon as I could. I went down to the office to ask for a sub, and when I tried to explain why I needed to go home, I started sobbing uncontrollably. The secretary was so nice to me, yet I knew she was very uncomfortable too. She promised me she would find me a sub and asked me what else she could do. I said nothing. I had to go home to prepare myself for how I would tell my children. Luckily, my mom and brother left work early and came to be with me. We worked out a plan for how we could break the news gently. Spoiler alert, there is absolutely no way to do that. None whatsoever. It's going to suck. It's going to be awful. It doesn't matter what you say or do. There is absolutely no good way to tell your children that their father took his own life. At that moment, I was so angry at him for being selfish. He left me with a horrible mess to clean up. He left them with so much pain and confusion. How could he do this to them? What was he thinking? Why did this have to happen? At the same time, I was heartbroken for him. Things must have seemed inescapably awful to him for him to feel that he had no other choice. Even though I was angry, I was also grieving for a man that I once loved. I felt so many emotions that day that ranged from anger and frustration to immense sadness. Thank goodness I had a team of people who were sending me love and support. My head was foggy. I felt numb. I felt like I was sleepwalking through a horrific nightmare. I kept trying to jolt myself awake, only to realize that this wasn't a dream. This was real, and I had no idea how to navigate this. Reluctantly, I called for an early dismissal for my children. I wanted them to stay at school as long as possible, so that their lives could be normal for just a little while longer. And in all honesty, I was dreading having to break the news to them. I was so nervous, and it still felt like I was going to be sick. My school secretary was worried that the kids might find out on Facebook or another social media platform, so she suggested I send them home early. They drove to school separately that day. My daughter came in first. When I told her the news, she let out the worst primal scream that I have ever heard, and she fell to the floor. The scream in and of itself was gut-wrenching and haunting. I can still hear it when I close my eyes at night. I don't ever want to hear that scream again. I wanted to hug her and take away her pain, but I knew I couldn't. There were no words that I could say and nothing that I could do that would provide comfort. It was the most helpless feeling in the world as a mom to watch her suffer and not to be able to stop it. You feel like a failure as a parent because it's your job to protect them. Yet I couldn't protect them from this. Grief does not come with a shield. My son took the early dismissal as his chance to start the weekend early. He went to hang out with his friends, and I had to call him to come home. He came home about 20 minutes after my daughter. When we told him the news, he got sick. He sobbed, and again, there was nothing I could say or do that would ease his pain. It tore me to shreds to have to watch them experience this. It didn't get easier with time. The days and weeks that followed were horrendous. I didn't know what to do to help them, and they just seemed to be lost and in shock. When they finally felt strong enough to come back to school, COVID-19 hit. On one hand, it was a blessing for us because they were still struggling to be around people. Online classes were much easier for them to manage than being in person. People mean well, but other kids would stare at them or ask them if they were okay. They just wanted to feel normal again. My son tried to be brave and go back to school a week after his dad's death, and in his first hour class, they announced it was Suicide Prevention Week. He didn't even make it an hour in school before he had to go home. On the other hand, they missed out on prom and graduation because of COVID. My sweet babies should have been celebrating their senior year, prom, and going off to college, but instead they were just in survival mode. It's an extremely difficult thing to lose a parent so young, and in such a violent way. I've lost many other beloved relatives in my life, including my Grandma Oatman, my Great Aunt Betty, my Aunt Kay, my Cousin Debbie, and my Uncle Delmer, just to name a few. And it's not that their deaths didn't affect me. They did, of course. Death is never easy, after all. It was just different. It didn't have the impact that those other deaths did. I didn't see those people every day, and they didn't die young or tragically. It doesn't matter how it comes, though. Death is still difficult, and you will never be fully prepared for it, no matter how or when it comes to visit. My hope in writing this book is that by sharing my story, I can help you heal. I hope you know that you're not alone. I know how much grief hurts. I know how debilitating it can be. I know that if you're reading this right now, you're probably in a lot of pain. You're most likely stuck in this battle, feeling as though your life lost its meaning or direction. I understand. I've questioned myself in this process more in the past year than I ever have in my entire life. What I can tell you is this: grief has no expiration date. There's no magic pill you can take. You can't decide when and where it will hit you. It's a process. While you can't decide how or when it will hit you, you can decide that you will choose to process it. I've met so many people who don't deal with their grief, and their emotions come out in very toxic ways. Pushing down your feelings does not make them go away. It simply makes you miserable, and it can even make you physically sick. My goal is to give you the tools you need so that when you're ready, you can work through your grief with grace. You are not alone. Millions of people experience grief every single day. Anyone who doesn't experience grief is not human, in my opinion. Grief is a natural part of life. No one escapes this world without experiencing it at some point. What I choose to hold on to is the thought that the bigger your pain and grief are, the stronger your love is. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's proof that love is very real, and it's worth the pain in the end to experience it. You are blessed to have known a love so strong. And I hope that it comforts you to know this one thing. You can heal, and you can go on without your loved one. The truth is that your loved one is still very much with you and a part of your life. They never really leave us. They simply take on a new form. Love never dies. It is eternal. I will show you how to feel the love that your person still has for you, and I will help you see that they are still around you all the time. You will get through this, and I hope to help you. I will show you how to process your grief so that it doesn't keep you stuck anymore. And I'll help you to see that there are still many more beautiful things in life out there for you if you simply choose to see them.